introduce our guest speaker, our Professor Shad Maruna, to bring you this year's Ann Peaker's lecture. Now, Shad is the head of Sociology, Social Policy and Criminology at the University of Liverpool and the past president of the American Society of Criminology 2022 to 2024. Previously, he has worked at the University at Cambridge, Queen's University at Belfast and Rutgers University in USA, where he was the Dean of the School of Criminal Justice. His book, Making Good, How Ex-Convicts Reform and Rebuild Their Lives, and named the Outstanding Contribution to Criminology by the American Society of Criminology. And he was the representative of the inaugural Research Medal and the Howard League of Penal Reform. Basically, he's an amazing guy, so there you go. Shad will be speaking for 30 minutes and he will then have time for questions afterwards. So please give a warm welcome to Shad as he delivers his lecture, What Happens in the Art Stops When the Art Stops, and Why Sustained Access to Creativity is a Matter of Justice. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Shad.
Sorry, my notes are on my phone. Hello, everybody. Oh, is that me? That's me. Hello, everybody. I'll speak softly. It's great to be here, and it's a real honor for me to be invited to an event like this. I never had the opportunity, I don't believe, to meet Ann Peaker, but as soon as I was announced as the Ann Peaker lecturer, I started to get emails from friends of mine who think a great deal of her. This is my slide. Click. Yeah. In particular, Martin Glenn, a good friend of mine for 20 years now. Martin often in his books will say that Ann Peaker was the reason he got into criminology, and explains that. I mean, Martin, if you don't know him, is a wonderful, talented artist himself in Birmingham, and has a long career of multiple art forms. But it was Ann who got him involved in doing a study called Enough Respect. Slide, yeah, and this. Truly amazing little study that Martin sent me. He got turned on to the idea of doing criminological research, and has become, like myself, a desistance researcher, and has done a number of desistance studies. And this report from 1998 was really well ahead of its time. It talks about the need for culturally sensitive and specific creative arts projects that should be provided, through which Black prisoners specifically may be helped to develop a better informed and more positive sense of their own identity. And whether this report was ever taken up and recognized by the prison services and probation, it at least had the wonderful benefit of creating a new criminologist. And Martin Glenn went on to do 20 years of criminology research after having this exposure. Martin is one of the many people who have me feeling insecure today. Certainly looking up some of the previous and peak lecturers who have stood at this podium in previous years. I'm nowhere near the level of artist that these individuals have, and indeed the presentations we got earlier just before the talk remind me of just my own inabilities. There was a video for those who were here about men can dance. I can't dance. I can't sing. I can't paint. I can't do poetry, or I tell myself these things anyway. And so when I was invited to give this lecture about what happens when the art stops, I did think maybe they got me confused with one of my colleagues. In particular, my long-term collaborator, Fergus McNeil, who is an artist as well as a criminologist. Fergus is a songwriter and a musician who's done some really important work doing songwriting with groups of people who are impacted by the justice system. I thought maybe did Fergus turn them down? It turns out Fergus gave the Ann Peak lecture way back in 2012. So you know, it's taken 13 years to get around to me on the list. But I'm very glad to be here anyway. What I do is maybe in art, maybe a science, this weird word called desistance from crime. And desistance became a big word in the system around about 10, 15 years ago. These are just a smattering of many books and articles that were written on the subject. To explain, if you missed if you missed this sort of excitement around the term, desistance is really just one of these academic jargon words that means something that many of us know when we see it, but we don't have a word in English that better captures what this thing is. It essentially is the process that used to be called going straight. Now going straight has very different connotations. But desistance is the abstinence of criminal behavior among those for whom they had previously engaged in patterns of criminal behavior. Desistance isn't about a burning bush or seeing the light, although these things sometimes occur. Desistance rather is what happens after someone has this moment of clarity. It is what they do with the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. What is the journey that they go on? And it's that process that we're interested in when we study desistance from crime, rather than the moment of change, rather the life of change that people go through. And how we research this, I like to think of desistance as the study of success stories. So we study desistance by seeking out those who have turned their lives around and trying to understand how and why they were able to achieve this success. Sometimes this is longitudinal research where we follow people through their lives. More often, it's retrospective research. We start with success stories and try to understand how they achieved what they achieved. This is essentially what I've been doing with my life over the last 30 years or so. Does desistance have anything to do with the arts? That's more of an open question. I was once in a prison, having a discussion with a prison governor, who definitely didn't know who I was, which is not uncommon. And I asked the prison governor if they did any sort of arts in that prison. Did they have a theater program? Do they work with community arts and these sort of things? And the answer was no. In this prison, we do desistance-focused work, and not realizing that I had been one of the people who introduced this idea of desistance to the criminal justice system 30 years ago. So Is art's work desistance work? That's a real good question. It certainly has influenced me since my earliest days in this field. And one of the very first people I met when I came to Liverpool back in 1995 was an artist named Peter Cameron, who had himself been incarcerated and does wonderful work, including paintings from his lived experience of incarceration. This is a brand new book that just came out called Artistic Convictions, which is a wonderful title. And I've decided that yes, I have artistic convictions, if not any artistic talent myself. I also had the wonderful opportunity to work with this gentleman when I was at Belfast. You heard earlier that I was at Queen's University Belfast for 20 years, and Mike Maloney is a legend to many of us in the prison arts space. He founded the Prison Arts Foundation in Northern Ireland. He also founded the Circus School and many other things. He was an extraordinary individual, and I had the opportunity to learn from him for many years. I also now currently back in Liverpool have the opportunity to work with Emma Murray on a number of projects, and Emma is the only, as far as I'm aware, criminologist in residence at an art gallery, our wonderful FACT gallery in Liverpool, and Emma has convened a number of exhibitions and works with the artists there to incorporate prison artists' work and also to work with those with lived experience of the justice system. I've also had the opportunity to do a couple of evaluations for an organization called Changing Tunes, originally based out of Bristol, and have learned a great deal from those interactions as well. But for me, I haven't had the opportunity to engage in a great deal of artistic pursuits myself. But I was delighted to go back and read Fergus MacNeill's and Peaker lecture way back from 2012, where Fergus argues that the desistance itself is a form of art. He argues that he thinks desistance is art in the sense that it involves transformative work that takes unpromising materials and unpromising situations and recreates something beautiful out of it. It involves new stories or narratives, new songs, new portrayals of self and society, the sculpting of a reshaped life, learning to dance in a new way, just as you saw in the earlier video. So maybe I am at some level an artist, or at least an art historian of a sense, and if Fergus is right about desistance from crime. I'll just explain very briefly, well, here in one slide, my contribution, I think, to the desistance literature, and then I'll give you a little taste of some of the narrative work that I do in this field. But I argue that desistance from crime is about changing a person's identity. Once crime becomes habituated into a person's routine and they get processed through the justice system, they get labeled and they take on the identity of this terrible word, offender. It's a terrible word for many reasons. One of which is once you've offended in the past tense, you become an offender, and it's hard to know when you're not an offender. When is an offender ever move on from a label like that? And that is a dangerous kind of label for sure. So how do you change that identity of being an offender? Well, what we know in psychology is that identity is largely an internal autobiographical narrative. It's a story that each of us carries with us. I'll get into that in a moment. And if that's true, then desisting from crime, it involves more than just learning new skills. Skills are wonderful. Skills are hugely useful. But rehabilitation, if it's about identity, it needs to be bigger than just learning a trade, learning new skills. It's about reorienting your life story. It's about understanding the world and yourself in a new way. So desistance is about making sense out of one's past and reimagining a new future for oneself consistent with that past. This comes out of a tradition in psychology and philosophy, sometimes called narrative psychology or narrative theory, that suggests that identity is an evolving story that reconstructs the past and anticipates the future in a way that gives life a sense of unity, meaning, and purpose over time. And eventually, the stories that we tell in these ways, the new slide, go on to shape and guide our future selves. So as Jerome Bruner famously wrote, that in the end, we become the autobiographical narratives which we tell about our lives. And psychologists and philosophers argue that this story making is one of the things that makes humans humans. It's one of the kind of core aspects of that differentiate ourselves as a species and makes us unique in many ways. And this is a particularly challenging thing to do, making a past meaningful when your past is problematic. And the people who I work with to say their pasts are problematic is definitely putting it gently, let's say. So sociologists like John Laughlin say one of the great challenges of narrative work is to make meaningful a life that is experienced as discontinuous, as radically changing and full of shame and guilt, and that is felt or feared to be worthless. And this is when Fergus talks about desistance as art. This challenge of congruence is one of the things I think he's talking about. Just to give you a little sample of this, one of my favorite student studies was done many years ago now. This a student I was working with when I was at the University of Cambridge, and he's worked in the prison system, but also was doing a master's with us. So he had remarkable access to folks inside prison, and his curiosity for his master's project was he was interested in the most habitually punished people in the prison service. That is, people with 10 or more prison stays who keep coming back time and time again. And he wanted to try to understand what was happening in their lives. And one of the things he did, and I've never used a question quite like this, but it gave him remarkable insights. He asked them if they could just share any reflections on their life, which I found too broad, but he got remarkable parallels when he talked to people. What a waste. There's been good points like my kids and women, but most of it has been a waste. I'd love to start again, but you can't. It's been a fucking waste. That's all I can say. A waste. Do you have any reflections on your life? Well, I wish it had never happened. There were good times, don't get me wrong, some excitement and adrenaline and so forth. But I want to know who I really am. And when I know who I am, I want people to know who I am, where I come from. That's basically it. That's a remarkable insight from a narrative psychologist perspective of someone who's looking for that congruence. He's looking to make sense out of a life that's experienced is shameful and lacking in meaning. He also asked him the question, what would it take to keep you from offending again? Here we got a lot of answers like the top one. Impossible. It's impossible. The system won't let you out. Again, that trap of stigma and the cycle of returning to prison. But then we got a fascinating answer here. This individual said, take away my past. I know you can't take away the past, but if I could just learn how to cope with it, again, this is the idea of rehabilitation as a narrative that if people could make sense out of their past, they can rewrite a future for themselves. And this is what we try to find in our research on narratives and desistance. In a book called Making Good, I refer to these as two views of a brick wall and two opposite ways of making sense out of a life that's perceived as full of waste. Condemnation scripts and redemption scripts. And I'll just go quite quickly through these. The condemnation script is one that you've heard many times, those of you who work in the justice system. These are individuals who've been born to multiple disadvantages. Today, we would talk about these things as ACEs or lives of trauma. These were individuals who have been let down by all those in authority, by families, by their schools, by their communities, and so forth. But they particularly have had negative experiences of justice and the criminal justice system. They feel like that they've been singled out, that they have been the usual suspects from the police and the courts and so forth. And as a result of all this, they've lost a sense of hope and purpose. They have basically decided that maybe that is all they are, is just an offender or a scumbag, and they've given up and any other sense of hope for themselves and their future. On the other hand, the redemption scripts certainly contain all of those same elements. These are individuals who have been through all the same disappointments, traumas, disadvantages. But these are individuals who found an apprenticeship in desistance. That is, they found someone, maybe a sibling, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone they were in prison with, who had turned their lives around, and they were able to look to that person as a kind of role model. They said, hey, if he can do it, and he was just as bad off as I was, then maybe I can do it. So they all found a key kind of role model, just like many of us in making transitions in life. They also found someone, and this could be the same person, but often was a romantic partner or a teacher, maybe somebody working in the justice system, maybe a theater company, a volunteer, but someone they met along the way saw something in them, said, hey, you could be more than just an offender. You've got something in you. You've got real ability. You've got genuine talent. You've got something, and that the person themselves couldn't see as well. And it was having someone else shine that mirror at them that made them realize they could do more and be more in their lives. Quite quickly, they were able to move from being a recipient of help, and they certainly got a lot of help from both their role model and this kind of Obi-Wan Kenobi figure who told them who they really were. They were able to quickly move into some role where they were put in the position of giving help to others. They were able to move from help recipient to helper and found that they had genuine ability to contribute to their community, to their family, to the wider society. And then finally, at some point, that change in identity got formally recognized and certified by others. So they were, very quick to show me diplomas and certificates and certifications that they had received. Look, I've received this qualification. I'm now a certified so-and-so. I'm now, completed my training in this, that, and the other. And these credentials, we're able to cancel out previous credentials, the criminal credential of the criminal record, and say, yes, I have that label, but I also have these new labels, and that this is who I am now. And one of the key parts of this process was taking that wasted life and finding some good in it. That is, taking a life that was perceived as being pointless and meaningless, and being able to turn that life into something of value. And many times the way they did this was acting as mentors for the next generation. Over and over again, I would hear people say, I screwed up for sure, but if I could help just one person turn their lives around so they didn't follow in my footsteps, then, they didn't put it in these terms, but essentially I would redeem my life, a sort of a life for a life. Okay, my life was bad and there's a lot to be ashamed of, but if I can use that life and make it into something meaningful for others, then I would have done something good. And this was one of my interviewees. I had interviewed him and his brother in part of the book, and he said it much more pretty and beautifully than I can. He said, he was sitting his brother's son down the other day, and I said, sons. He said, I sat both of them down the other day, and I said, listen, me and your dad have wasted our lives. I don't want you to do what we've done. For 15 or 16 years, me and your dad wasted our lives. Now we want you to take a leaf out of our book, and that essentially turning that wasted life into a book that can be given as a gift for the next generation is a big part of what the desistance process entails. To go back to my prison governor on that tour, if rehabilitation is about developing this new story for oneself, then clearly creative work and whatever that may be, songwriting, poetry, it could be painting, it could be being involved in theater companies. Creative work is right at the heart. It's not a nice to have. It's not a on the margins, only if there was extra budget. It's really at the core, because this is what the arts do. This is the language of the arts. It's the raison d'etre. I mean, again, I'm talking to a room full of artists who know this much better than I do as a social psychologist. But you are right if you have a feeling that this is exactly where art touches people, and so to go to our to go to our initial question. Does what happens when the arts stops? If you stop the arts, you're not doing desistance. You're not getting at people's stories in the way that needs to be touched in those ways. And again, Ann Peaker, writing 25 years ago, knew this exactly, and her point about culturally specific stories and creating that positive sense of someone's identity. Stories are a crucial part of understanding yourself and of course one's race, one's ethnicity, one's background. It could be your Irish heritage or being from a Black British background. But whatever it is, that's part of your story, and it doesn't start with your birth. Your story can be generations old, and it's about understanding how you got where you are in this world and fitting that in and making sense of that. And so I think the Enough Respect study was very prophetic in that regard. So what happens if the art stops? Well, if the art stops, we're not doing desistance. That's for sure. But the subheading, which you can't really read on the flyer, is why sustained access to creativity is a matter of justice. So there's a second claim I want to make in this talk with my 5 minutes, 3 minutes left. With my 3 minutes left, what am I talking about here? What does art have to do with doing justice? Well, fortunately, there is a new term out. Again, we in academia, we're good at coming up with new terms. You might have just gotten your head around the idea of restorative justice as a new form of justice. And actually restorative justice came around in the 1990s. So if you're just getting your head around that one, you're due for a new form of justice. There's obviously a lot of words that we like to precede justice: social justice, gender justice, environmental justice, and so forth. But in the criminal justice system, restorative justice has really taken our imaginations in important ways. And restorative justice is about bringing together the participants in a criminal act or an act of harm. And so sometimes they use the labels: the offender meets the victim, and supporters of both sides will come together and work through and mediate after a criminal event. And that is changed the way we think about justice in the traditional adversarial justice system, where victims don't have a voice, the accused don't have a voice, and you don't have certainly any kind of mediation and remediation between the groups. So restorative justice has done great things in this field. Generative justice, it wants to take this idea a step further, I think, whereas restorative justice focuses on that individual level where individuals are getting together to work out a criminal act. Generative justice wants to both step back and look at the bigger picture, and it says that too often our justice system ignores that we aren't just atomized individuals, that we aren't just individual actors, that those persons, whether we call them victims or offenders, they belong in these networks and webs, and they belong in this larger bodies of meaning. You know, we all come from somewhere and so forth. And generative justice is looking more at these, and I'll give Fergus McNeil, Mary Corcoran, and Beth Weaver are the editors of a new book which many of us are included in. Their definition, and they admit that the definition is really difficult, and they're not quite sure they're ready to nail their flag to the mast with this. Their definition is something like this: the social processes and community practice involving justice-affected people, whether they're victims of crime, perpetrators of crime, people who have been through the justice system rightly or wrongly, that are somehow generative of new relationships characterized by solidarity. So they say that the key aspects of generative justice are solidarity, recognition, and belonging. And that the key difference, again, with restorative justice, which would have many of these same values, is this idea of we-ness. It's about not just dealing with individuals, but rather changing the way communities see the aftermath of crime. And so trying to change the way that people in the justice system are treated as a group, as a class more broadly, and likewise trying to change the way society sees them as a group. And again here, the arts have a large role to play. Again, quoting Fergus, he says that art does more than just impact someone's individual sense of themselves. Art also is public, so it communicates and represents transformative processes like desistance to others. And that's a key part of desistance narratives. The desistance narrative is for the person to make sense of themselves, but they also need to use that narrative for others to build that kind of forgiveness in the wider process. So the arts are great at closing down the social distance between people by inviting them to share experiences and emotions, to understand, not just in the cognitive sense, their common humanity, maybe even to build the reciprocities on which the good life depends. So again, social solidarity, moral recognition, and belonging are core aspects of what art can do. And this was in another Ann Peker lecturer, Alison Liebling's wonderful new book. She's describing this book in an interview. The book is just out, if it's out. But this was an interview just this week, and Alison describes a prisoner in the book, one of her interviewees. He said that engaging in art, like faith practices, very interestingly, rearranges the hierarchy on new criteria. It's a leveler. And by that he means when you're playing in a band, like changing tunes, many times the drummer and the lead guitar are people in prison, and the bass player is a prison officer, and the keyboards is a junior governor in those bands. And when you're doing art in those ways, those traditional hierarchies break down, and people just become members of a band, and that kind of art making in collectivity, it works on a remarkable level, both for identity, but also for a sense of solidarity and shared personhood. And again, Alison carries on to say that people in prison make clear that survival and growth are grounded in these kind of human relationships, these generous gestures, or in play, again, not a nice to have, but essential. These ways of people interacting together. We can call it play if we like, but it's where this sort of breakdown of hierarchy happens, not in these expert interventions or knowledge. And that's again an insight she got from people with lived experience of the power of arts above and beyond those of us experts in our interventions and programs. So I had a last slide. It's gone. That's okay. Yeah, there it is. Wonderful. In many ways, then, justice, generative justice, might be akin to this earlier concept of respect, and enough respect that to do justice is to create this kind of mutual respect of those with experiences of the justice system of all types. So thanks very much for having me. I'm delighted to take any questions in that.
Well, massive thank you for Professor for giving us that lecture. That was amazing, great to listen to. We're gonna Roman mic is gonna be handed over to the floor. If you've got any questions, please put your hands up. Just wait for the mic. And people are online, if you can type your questions, but keep it short so we can get as many questions to the professor as possible, that would be much appreciative. Okay, any questions?
So thank you, Professor Maruna. I'm Sean Parker of the Falsely Accused Support Organisation and Empowering the Innocent, and I'm an artist. So thank you for this. The people who are maintaining innocence in prison, up to a fifth of the population, don't have anything to desist from, by definition. Do you have any words of advice for those people?
Oh, interesting. Well, I don't know if I have any advice for them. They certainly have narrative work to be done, and all they've got is their narrative, is their story, and we of course ask them to give that up and to create a false story. That we want them to confess to their crimes, to engage in forms of therapy and so forth, and that's a huge and damaging and a remarkable challenge that people have to undergo. That they would rather hold on to their narrative truth rather than give a different narrative that might help them get through the parole process, might let them get on to programs that can help them get out of prison earlier and so forth. So they, it's not a group that I have done work with myself, but yes, it's a tremendous challenge they have in terms of narrative that they're facing. And I guess my advice would be more for the system, and I certainly have spent a long time. I mean, so you're absolutely right, and those figures of around about a fifth in formal denial of what they've done or what they've been charged with. But many more. In fact, the majority of people who we call offenders are on a kind of spectrum of what the system would see as denial. That is much of what rehabilitation entails. It certainly did back in the 1990s when I started this work, was getting individuals to take blame, take responsibility for everything they've done. And it was seen the only way you can be rehabilitated is to confess to everything we say you need to confess to, and not to spread that blame to anyone else, to take 100% responsibility for your actions. With colleagues like Ruth Mann, I've written about this over the decades as a kind of a narrative handcuffing of individuals to say, we're going to force your narrative into this very narrow box that we call responsibility, that actually is a real denial of the way stories work. Stories by their nature involve the context for someone's actions, making sense out of what they've done and so forth. And so it's very unusual for any of us to have a narrative whereby all the bad things I've done in my life were all me. I did them because I chose them. I did them because I wanted to. I can't blame anybody for anything I've done. We sometimes pretend that we think like this, but no one actually does. All of our stories are to make sense out of our lives. We have to recognize the things that got us to where we are. And if one of those is I was wrongfully convicted of this mess, and it was actually someone else, and I was framed wrongly in these ways, then people need to be able to hold on to that narrative, because you take away that and you take away any hope of people moving on with the future.
Hi, I've got a question for the webinar from Melanie Jameson. As you'll all know, education provision, including arts, has been cut. The high security prison I visit has lost its arts music teacher. How can we challenge this?
Yeah, so it is the it is the challenge. It's happening more widely. I mean, this is no consolation to anyone, but in universities, the arts and humanities are under threat as well, but in particular, I mean, prisons in general are in an incredible financial strain, and yes, the arts are being targeted as across the board in many facilities, again as a kind of a luxury rather than a necessity. And I suppose much of my talk was in a roundabout and maybe not the most linear way, trying to say that the case we need to make is around desistance, and if the system still wants to think of itself as being about promoting desistance from crime, it really can't do that if it's taking away the arts. It can't. We can't be doing desistance if we are going to reduce individuals to some basic skills, to correcting deficits and accredited programs and the like. That's not how any of the desistance stories that we have been collecting now for 25, 30 years, that's no one tells that as their story of desistance. And that kind of evidence, although it will be called anecdotal, it will be called it's actually the best possible evidence we've got how people change, which is what the system claims it wants to do. It wants to transform lives, so-called. If it wants to transform lives, the people to start with are those who have transformed their lives, and to find out how they got to where they got. And they didn't get there through some sort of 12-week anger management course. They got there by going through the hard work of re-understanding who they were and what their lives were about. And oftentimes that was done in a music course or a prison theater or a dance class like the kind we've been talking about today.
So thank you so much for that, Shad, and for such an incredible body of work that has committed to this work for such a long time. My name's Sarah Bartley. I'm a theatre maker and an academic, and I wondered if you could talk about sort of repeated narratives a little bit. You know, you talked about the significance of narrative in your work and in the field, and I wonder, as someone who's sometimes feeling like we're telling the same story, but why maybe not, that story not being heard or not being actioned, like what is the power in continuing to tell that story, or what is the power in telling maybe a surprising or different story, introducing a new narrative? Yeah, I wonder if you could speak to that kind of idea of repeated narrative.
And I mean, are you referring to the fact that probably every Ann Peaker lecture for the last few decades has had similar things, those sort of public narratives, or are you talking about individuals, say someone with lived experiences narrative?
I guess both, and then in the work that artists might make, that there's lots of resonances across those life narratives that are being articulated. But yeah, absolutely, those kind of public policy narratives.
You know, yeah, I guess I will play the old guy card on this. You know, so my lived experience of doing this for 30 years, you know, although unquestionably prisons are worse than they've ever been. Unquestionably, that institution has a remarkable way of sustaining this status quo, and the status quo is in the basement from its very existence. Taking that for granted, things have changed, and you know, language. And sometimes you could make a case that language can be empty, and this is possibly true. I go back to the prison governor who said they do desistance-informed work, so they're getting rid of the arts. You know, there is, you know, people can misuse language all the time, and I've seen it with my own work. But also language, like other forms of art, language matters, and we have seen a real change, introducing things like trauma and the trauma-informed. There's been real problems with the trauma-informed movement, and I'm not, you know, I'm not a true believer in it, but you know, it is something that we certainly in the 1990s knew that the people in prisons and on probation had experienced massive trauma, but nobody was talking about it. We couldn't talk about it. That would be giving excuses, and that was the era of, you know, no more excuses, and people need to take responsibility, and crime is a choice, and don't give us all these sob stories. So that has made major changes in the field. The rise of lived experience as a concept, but especially you know, not beyond just the word of it, as an idea, you know, has really really changed everything in lots of ways. We had a wonderful seminar earlier today at the Clinks meeting, and we talked about how the system has a very kind of narrow filter of what it accepts as evidence, and what, you know, the conversation has to be only around, what RCTs have you done, and can you prove with a meta-analysis that what you're doing has had these kind of impacts, and it can be very, very narrowing in terms of the field. Well, lived experience has always been there. People who have been through the system have always known what needs to be done and what really matters and what works in the system. But in recent years, their voices are getting out in a massive way. And partially this is through things like social media and podcasts and so forth. Some of it is about desistance research and the academics amplifying these voices of lived experience. But most of it is they bypassed all of us academics and decided we're going to be we've already got a voice and we can use it. And people are listening in ways that they haven't before. And I think that is also kind of challenging the system. Who knows better what's happening in our prisons than the people who have been there? And you've got ex-prisoners more and more speaking in the media, in the news, and the Joe public, has enough radar of epistemic truth to say, well, look, these people would know, they've been there. I'm going to trust what they're saying, and maybe if that's different than what the system is telling us, it's a way of challenging that kind of filter on what is information and evidence allowed by the system. So I think things are changing and changing for the better. At the same point, we're still kind of where we are year after year, but that's what gives me hope, and I do think there are shoots of optimism to be had as well. Yeah.
Hi, hi, Sir. Carry on drinking.
Hi.
I haven't quite formulated what I wanted to say, but first of all, thank you well, you did a great job, and thank you for your work. I'm Jenny from Barefaced Theatre.
Okay.
Where we're talking about the arts and it being kind of an experiential feeling sense and a leveler, I wondered whether where we're faced with so much funding cuts and always feeling like we have to prove ourselves in the world out there, the value of the arts, that it's, thank you so much, it's an essential, it's not a nice to have. I wonder about how prison officers and probation staff and the staff within the criminal justice community are being trained, and what your thoughts are around being more creative in their training so that they can feel the power of the arts when they're being trained, that we maybe wouldn't have to fight so hard because they get it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Shane?
That's wonderful. Yeah. I mean, the training is definitely in crisis, and the staffing crisis, where we're getting people, we're losing staff so quickly that they've barely been trained by the time they've left. But yes, some of the training I have seen has recognized the need for input from people in prison, people formerly in prison. And so that lived experience movement has even entered the training. It says, do we really want to release folks onto the wings if they haven't met and talked to people who have lived in those facilities or are living in those facilities? So they are having a little more exposure, I think, to those voices. They're certainly not playing on a five-a-side football match with them, or playing in a band, or singing in a choir with people who are on the inside. And wow, wouldn't that be a remarkable way to train the next generation of prison officers? You talk about humanizing those in your care. That would be a wonderful idea. I think in so many ways, Oh, and I've lost what I was going to say. But yes, those thinking of the arts in the leveler idea. I remember now. It is it's about the thinking in different areas and contexts. So we often think about it as rehabilitation, and that's great. But yeah, we don't think about it in terms of recruitment. We don't think about it in terms of training. We don't think about it in so many other ways. And some of the point I was trying to get there toward the end is the arts aren't just for the people going through. The art has an audience, and that audience can be so crucial. I'll give a very quick anecdote, and then I'll turn to more questions. I teach a class inside prisons. I had for many years. It stopped there for a little while post COVID, but in doing teaching this class, we had a graduation at the end of the semester, and for the graduation, we often bring in somebody with lived experience who is a fantastic motivational speaker to give the graduation lecture, and we had a fabulous one at a prison. I won't say where, but it was an English prison a few years back, and the prison decided that they were going to crack down on our graduation, because we bring in people in prisons, families, and their friends and visitors. And so the prison decided we needed sniffer dogs, and we needed officers to stand and watch the graduation, which had never happened to us before, and it was a kind of a frustration for many of us on the dynamic. And anyhow, we carried on. We did the graduation. They had a speech from a guy who had been in that prison 25 years earlier, and he gave an incredible graduation talk, as did all the people who were graduating. At the end of the day, I was talking to one of the officers who had the dogs, and I asked him how he found it, and he said to me, he said, "I've worked in this prison for 30 years. This is the best day I've ever had in this prison," and obviously a low bar, but he said, that gentleman there, I was here when he was a resident here. I remember him, and I can't believe I've just heard him give that talk that he gave. And anyhow, this isn't a new staff, but it transformed the way he looked at his whole career of what he was doing. He's only used to seeing prisoners who come back time and time again. He's only used to seeing people in prison in that hierarchical way. This opportunity to see people in prison in this new way is transformative, not just to the prisoner, but to staff, to governors, and to the wider public.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Chad Maruna. Thank you. Sadly, we have to bring it to an end, but thank you very much for giving us your time. Right, we're just coming up to an end. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. On a personal note, for someone who comes from a lived experience, I just want to say thank you for what you do. Thank you for providing a platform. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making people like us be seen. What you do is important, and we need you. Please don't stop. Okay, right. So that webinar is coming to an end. So bye to everyone on the webinar. Thank you very much. If you've got any questions afterwards, we've got drinks, and come and speak to us afterwards. And I'm pretty sure Professor Maroon will hold the drink so that he's sober enough to answer your questions. So get in there quick.